Now, another issue we've covered extensively here on RFL, and that is East Ramapo and the debate over whether to appoint a state monitor to that troubled school district. Democratic State Senator David Carlucci introduced his chamber's bill last night, and here he explains the headline of it.
What's important to remember is it's not the controller that has the oversight. The controller's role here is he would be able to, in consultation with the governor, appoint the monitor. The monitor would then be independent. The monitor would have the opportunity to appeal decisions to the Commissioner of Education and on fiscal matters to the state controller. The monitor will be there on the ground, be able to be in those executive sessions, will be able to make decisions that would be able to be appealed to the state Commissioner of Education and develop this long-term strategic plan.
That's different from last week. On Friday, we told you about the Assembly passing a bill that would empower the state to appoint a monitor to oversee the school board. Now, the board, currently controlled by Hasidic Jews who send their children to private yeshivas, it has been accused of funneling money from the public schools to those yeshivas, particularly for things like transportation and special ed. So now we're looking at two not just slightly dissimilar, but very different bills, and only 2 days left in the legislative session to make a deal. I want to bring in our panel, Dominic Carter, political journalist and author who calls East Ramapo his school district, Scott Vanderhoff, attorney and former five-time Rockland County executive, and Andrew Whitman, who you met before, our senior political correspondent. Okay, on Friday, Assembly, by about a 30-vote margin, passes a bill that basically says we're going to take it out of your hands. We're going to give the final say-so from both a budgetary and then from an implementation standpoint, the power to an independent monitor. We've gone through this rigmarole for years now. We've proven this can't work. Somebody else is going to come in. Goes to the Senate, and before the ink's even dry, they say not so fast. Now, we don't know exactly what it means, but fair to say, Scott, that what the bill would have done to really give authority to the monitor would have a much different role, and I think, as Andrew said in the commercial break, far more reactive than proactive.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. The Assembly bill, which, by the way, Carlucci helped devise initially, was much stronger in terms of implementation and having a monitor actually overrule the board in those cases where he or she felt that they were incorrect. The new bill, which may be better for the Senate folks because a lot of resistance in the Senate Republican side, simply goes to the controller. It's unclear, however, what the governor's role would be. I mean, in consultation with the governor and the controller don't talk. So I don't know quite what that means. But the controller would have some oversight by an individual who would sit there, but he would not have, or she would not have, the teeth to overrule. Next question then is, so as it's sent to the Education Department, what teeth do they have that they don't already have? I mean, the reason that they went with this was to have a monitor who had some control. So it seems to me that it was clear to Mr. Carlucci, who's now changed his position, that the thing could not pass the Senate. And the Assembly, I would think that the Assembly Democrats are not happy with Mr. Carlucci.
They got to be doing somersaults in a mad way. But here's my thing, Dom, and as I still don't understand one aspect. I understand people in Simca Felder in Brooklyn, or even Shelley Silver, guys who voted against this, who have heavy Orthodox populations, that how they vote for this could really make a difference whether or not they're going to keep their job. But why is there so much opposition in, especially a lot of Republican districts in different parts of the state that have no real threat? And I don't buy the slippery slope business. I mean, we have to go all the way back to Roosevelt and Long Island to really find a time when the state legislature took over a school district, or Yonkers, I guess. But my point is, why is there political opposition to this?
Opposition to the monitor?
Opposition to the Assembly bill. Why does the Senate feel the need to really water it down so much?
Well, first of all, we have to consider, Richard, that it may have passed the Assembly, but anyone that covers politics knows that by the time it reached the state Senate, as was just pointed out, it was going to be watered down if it had any shot of survival.
But I'm asking why. The legislation and the issue to me. Some issues I understand completely, depending on who's in control. One's a Republican, one's a Democratic issue. But to me, this didn't scream partisan to me.
But who wants to take on an 800-pound gorilla? If you support this bill, the Hasidic community is looking at you potentially as an enemy that needs to go from public office.
100% I agree to that, and I understand that. But again, Scott, for me, if you're a Republican who's going to vote against this, who's got a less than 1% Hasidic population in your district, what's the risk? The Assembly already carried the water for you. They did the hard work. They crafted it. You can go along, find whatever political compromise you want them to give you on another issue, but why care enough to stand in the way to scuttle the thing?
Well, you know,
and it is principally a Republican opposition.
Yes, and I don't, there's something else working here, and I didn't have a chance, and I haven't looked to see where the districts combine. But remember, the Senate Republicans desperately want to hold on to that House. And they can't afford to be offending whole groups of people anywhere in the state who might, in fact, vote as a bloc against their candidates. That includes, by the way, Orange County, okay, where you got a big Hasidic group up there. So, I mean, at stake here is the issue of the bloc, quite frankly, okay, and what it can do to their hopes to hold on to that chamber.
There are also, I think, risks of being labeled as anti-Semitic and perhaps seeing money dry up from some people who might respond to that kind of accusation. We heard several lawmakers say, we had a quote on Friday in the Assembly, if I vote for this monitor, I'm anti-Semitic. If I vote against the monitor, I'm racist. That puts them between a bind, and you know, if you follow the money on that one, you probably want to avoid being labeled as anti-Semitic.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, and I think, you know, it's a hard bill for that very reason. You're dealing with, when we've gone over it in the show here, a very desperate situation. People are trying to find accommodations, and so they use the slurs, which doesn't help anybody to try to resolve the issues.
And I don't want to be right on this, though, Scott, and you've been dealing with this issue for too many years now, but as Dom says, from a first-hand perspective, and you can echo it, in fact, your wife, a teacher in the district, right?
Yes.
That tensions are escalating year by year on this thing, and if there's no resolution going into it next year, which it seems very likely there won't be, this is not going to resolve itself here. So lawmakers who want to take a pass for political safety on this one, they're not solving this problem. They're going to have to keep coming back to this. I just don't see how this resolves itself by itself.
Well, I'm not sure legislation is the answer here anyway. I mean, you got to put these folks together. There's a new board, by the way, in East Ramapo, a couple of new faces on that board. And one, I think, is not Hasidic. And there may be room here to actually say, okay, we've gotten through all of this, throwing stones at one another. Let's try to get together. And I've talked to leaders in the county and say, you know, they've got to do that because children are not being educated properly.
You would have been thought, though, the shock value would have gotten there by now. I mean, this is hardly the first bad headline with it.
Yeah, that's true. But all of the ammunition now has been on this legislation, not on the resulting need to get things accomplished there. And I think once you get past this, one way or the other, I think I'm hoping, and maybe I'm too optimistic, but
I hope you're right.
I'm hoping that the communities can find themselves answers.
Very quickly, that new board member was supported by the Hasidic majority, and so would be expected to vote in line with the other members. So I don't think there's a big change in the composition.
Communities are not going to solve this.
But
it's not going to happen.
There was softened talk from some of the board members in the wake of this monitor bill that said we're going to start taking actions. They were the ones pushing for the controller. I don't know if with the threat of the monitor removed, if they would actually follow through on that, but that would be the hope.
And at the risk of super inside baseball, Dom, I know I got to hit a break. Tom DiNapoli, who I like, sweet guy, okay, good controller. The idea that you've got a numbers guy, okay, because that's what, and he's going to go in and he doesn't have the power to control the purse strings and has as adversarial relationship with the governor as anybody right now. There is a bit of, you know, high irony here as to who would be the compromise solution out of Albany to go deal with this. Guy that the governor won't even acknowledge, right, who tried to get removed, and also the guy whose job is supposed to be basically the state CPA, but he can't control the finances.
It's called a political mess, and this is what happens when you water down a bill.
Exactly. All right, coming up next. Just a couple days left for lawmakers in Albany to wrap up a host of issues, but this year things trickier than past years, and that's saying something. We'll tell you why.